Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. Got a few things on the agenda for you today. First and foremost, Elon Musk. He seems to understand the problem of replacement migration. He seems to understand the great replacement. He's talking about anti-white attacks, anti-white slurs, the desire to drive whites out of Europe and America. And yet, for some reason, it's difficult for Elon Musk to square this with the fact that he seems to want to import a large amount of foreigners into the United States through the H-1B program. He doesn't like illegal immigration, but he seems pretty on board with this mass legal immigration, and it seems largely motivated by his desire to operate his own countries. We'll get into that dichotomy and why it seems so prevalent. We're also going to talk about the arrests made in Minnesota. Turns out that there were 3 arrests that came down from the DOJ, though sadly one of them did not include Don Lemon, though the reasons are there. We'll talk about why in a moment. And then, of course, also want to talk about the drop in violent crime. We're seeing studies coming out saying that there has been a sharp drop in violent crime under Donald Trump. Going to talk about why that is. Before we get to all of that, let's hear it from today's sponsor. Hey guys, scammers and criminals raise the stakes in 2025. In 2026, the choice is up to you. Act or stay exposed. 2025 marked a turning point where threats to privacy and security became more powerful, more precise, and harder to stop. Scams didn't just increase, they leapt forward in complexity. AI began to clone voices, text sounded like family and friends, emails impersonating banks pulled people in. The people hit by these scams aren't chosen at random. Here's how they get targeted. Your personal information, your name, address, phone number, family members, age, and online behavior, it's all publicly available online right now. It's not hidden and it's not hard to find. It's published. You can see it for yourself by simply Googling your name and address. You'll find hundreds of data brokers openly listing where you live, who you live with, and how to contact you. This is how scammers decide who to target. This is how identity fraud starts, long before the damage shows up. As 2026 begins, there's a choice to make. Do you keep leaving your information online and vulnerable, or do you take action to remove it? 2025 showed us what unchecked exposure leads to. If you want to start 2026 with less exposure and more control, use my code Auron for 15% off all Patriot Protect plans. Head to patriot-protect.com/Auron and use the promo code Auron for 15% off the yearly subscription. All right, guys, let's dive into it. Before we get into Elon Musk, I want to put out a disclaimer. Elon Musk has been overall an ally to the right. He's far from perfect. I'm not saying that there aren't things you need to watch out for. I'm not saying that there aren't things that you need to push back on. Obviously, we're going to do a lot of that today. So that's very clearly not my stance. However, I also don't want to make it sound like it's just all Elon bashing. Watch out. Elon's just a traitor. He's not, he's completely turned against whatever. I don't think that's true either. You have to recognize that Elon Musk had a massive pile of money he could have spent on anything, many things that were far more profitable. And instead, he bought Twitter. And when he bought Twitter, he wasn't just securing some kind of financial investment. I'm sure he wants it to turn a profit. Obviously, that's part of his intention. But I think Elon Musk was perfectly aware that he could have put his money into a far more directly profitable thing. Instead, he did something that most conservatives never do. Like, this is the problem with conservative billionaires, conservative donor class. They don't recognize the importance of owning prestige organizations. They just care about the bottom line. Where's my money? Where's my profit? Where's my year-to-year increase? Right? They never go and do what leftist billionaires do, which is like just start newspapers or buy prestigious institutions or basically buy universities and then turn them into factories for leftists, propaganda outlets for leftists, places where you can park leftists so they can receive money, sinecures, educations. They turn these different cultural apparatuses into machines that produce more and more left-wingers, more left-wing culture, more left-wing power. They understand the importance of making that long-term investment and not just going in and saying, okay, well, as long as this is going to turn a little bit of profit, then it'll be worth my time. And that's what, to his great credit, Elon Musk did. Instead of just looking for the highest return on his dollar, he recognized the power of controlling a critical node in the cathedral, in the collective consensus-making apparatus of the United States ruling class. Because Twitter isn't just another social media site like Facebook, Instagram. Obviously, these are like larger than. Hey guys, sorry about that. One of the excitements of a live stream, sometimes your internet goes out for a minute. But it looks like we are back. So I think everybody can see me. Okay, I think we're back. Let me know if there's any audio problems or anything. I just joined. So, okay, good, good. Looks like we're right. All right, guys. So again, sorry about that, but technical difficulties. What are you going to do? All right. So like I was saying, Elon's purchase of Twitter was rather significant because it's not just another social media site. It is basically one of the critical, parts, one of the critical nodes in the hive mind that kind of runs the American government. It's like the New York Times or Harvard. It's one of those things that regularly inform the opinion of the most important and influential people. Even when our governments, decide to do things, they actually announce it on the internet. When Joe Biden, stepped down from running for president, where do you find out? You find out on Twitter, and that's treated as some kind of legally binding thing. So that's obviously a scenario that kind of shows you how Twitter occupies a space that is just very, very different from anything else. So as I go into this, just remember the fact that Elon put that much money into buying Twitter and ensuring that there is at least some level of speech. I know it's not as free speech as people want. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was previously. Obviously, it allows the right to have a beachhead and a constant place in which they can discuss the culture and have an influence directly. Also, obviously, big time funding when it came to the Trump campaign and throwing his weight behind that. Now we know that the Trump relationship got volatile. He wasn't happy with obviously Doge and other aspects of what the Trump administration was doing, but Elon has been an ally. He has been somebody who has a positive impact on the right. So I just want to get that out of the way before we start talking about the rest of it. All right. So that said, if you've been on Twitter at all, you've seen Elon talking about basically the great replacement. All right. This is a guy who's from South Africa. He knows what it's like to watch a country decline as the demographics shift. He's familiar with what happens when people, especially who are openly hostile to whites, gain power and start using that power to suppress whites, right? He knows what that looks like. He understands the violence. He understands all of that stuff. So I can't imagine that that is not in his mind. That's not somewhere pretty close to the forefront of his mind when he's making these decisions, when he's talking about what he's talking about. When he gets on Twitter, he's constantly saying, okay, there's this, it's not just about immigration, though he notes that that's a huge problem, mass immigration. He also notices the virulent anti-white policies, the anti-white rhetoric, the way in which governments are and their kind of apparatchiks are openly attacking white people collectively and trying to push them out of countries. So Elon's not just talking about the current immigration crisis. He's not just talking about even bad language used toward white people or hateful language towards white people, though that is very common and very aggressive. He's actively addressing the issues of systemic replacement of white people, intentional bias, intentional racism towards white people, attacks on white people, the explicit goal of removing white people from their homelands, the idea that white people don't have homelands, that there is no native land for any white person. For some reason, white Europeans are the only peoples in the entire world that can never be native to a country, that can never have a homeland, that can never have a place that is theirs. Obviously, this is all huge. The fact that Elon Musk acknowledges this stuff is a really big deal. Like, I know things have moved so fast that it's really hard to recognize what all that means. But remember, just a few years ago, saying the phrase anti-white was basically off limits until like Tucker Carlson started floating it on Fox News. And it really was not that long ago where any of the talking points Elon Musk was espousing would have gotten you labeled like far right, Nazi, like alt right, right? Like those were considered like opinions that are on Stormfront, or things that get echoed in like super edgy chat rooms, right? Like that. These were very taboo phrases. The fact that he uses the phrase "the Great Replacement" in and of itself is a big deal. These are things that would have got you banned off social media, would have gotten you fired from your job, would have gotten you pulled from every platform, would have gotten you debanked. Would have SPLC and ADL would be writing articles on you, making sure that you were radioactive and no one could touch you. And now it's just something that people say because the richest man in the world says it. And it's crazy because just to show you like where we're at. So I have to reload the video because the internet went down. But let me reload this video real quick. Uh, but it's crazy that despite this being kind of the obvious thing that's going on here, we have a lot of people still trying to deny it. So how obvious is it that we are going through this, that this is the goal of our political system? Well, we actually have a guy from the State Department on tape saying, yeah, this is the purpose of this. This is the Democrats. This is what they're doing. They're using the Great Replacement to rig elections. They want the country to be less white because white people vote Republican. White people are conservatives. Here's the video.
Well, why are they allowing it? They want to change the demographics of the United States. They really do. Because, I mean, no, honestly, the people from Nebraska, like my family's like Americans that have, my family's been in the United States for 400 years. Traditional standard Americans are not leftists. Latin Americans all leftists. And it's just, it literally is. It's just to try to change that demographic.
So you have the video here from Project Veritas. I have an undercover guy speaking with the State Department official, and he comes out and says, look, it's really simple. White guys in Nebraska, they're not leftists. They're conservatives. They're naturally conservative. The basic default setting of the United States white population, the traditional population, yes, the heritage population, heritage Americans, tend to be very conservative. Like at the very least, like center-right conservatives. And they're not going to vote for radical leftist policies. They don't want it. So what do you do in a liberal democracy? What do you do if you're the Democrats and you need to push this radical progressive agenda, but the native population isn't really interested? And the answer is you replace them. And by the way, this has been the policy of the left for basically ever. They've recognized this dynamic for a long time. Leftism cannot win in America. It is not sustainable in America without replacing the population, without demographic replacement. It's critical that they replace the people who live here. Because as they said, the people in Nebraska, natural conservatives. The people coming across the border, the Latin Americans that you're always told, you have the George and Jeb Bushes saying, oh, well, these are natural Americans. They're natural conservatives. They have family values, they're Catholic, they're Christian, they're gonna be right wing, they're gonna be conservative. No, they're not. Actually, they're natural leftists. If for no other reason than when they get here, they want stuff. They want protection. They want advantages that they don't have because they're new immigrants. And so they give their loyalty to the left. So, the State Department's not confused as to why they want this policy. Why does the left want mass immigration? To replace you demographically. It's not just to replace your principles, not just replacing your abstract principles. It's not because you're super double loyal to the Constitution. They want to replace you because of your race. They want to replace you because of the color of your skin. Because they know, frankly, the left is not hesitating on this. The State Department's not hesitating to say this. White people, the color of their skin seems to indicate they're more likely to vote a specific way. Now, obviously, that's not the case all across the board. Not all, obviously. Significant portion of white people do vote leftists, and there are plenty of minorities that minority voters who do vote conservative, though disproportionately it is almost always them breaking the left to the left. Hispanics, except in the last election, Indians, Chinese, Jews, they all vote left. Asians in general, they usually vote 65, 70% or more for the left. Obviously, blacks are considered a monolithic voting bloc for the left. But there's always like 10% of blacks who vote conservative. And there's, the 20, 30% of Jews who vote conservative. There's the 20, 30% of Asians that vote conservative. So again, it's not all. We can find some of the worst human beings. Yeah, what's the Nick Land quote? Never become so racist that you forget that the worst people in the world are white leftists. But ultimately, when we're just looking at the wide demographic spread, when we're just looking at the raw numbers, you can predict how an election is going to go by how many white people are in an area. If it's more, you're probably going to get a conservative. If it's less, you're probably going to get a liberal. Again, not all, not across the board, not every time, but this is generally how it works. And the left knows this. This is not a crazy right wing talking point. It's the left's strategy. It's what the State Department openly admits is the left's strategy. So there's no confusion here about for anybody except for some reason conservatives about how this works. And Elon Musk is aware of this, which is what he says. He points out, like, look, it's a hatred of white people, but it's also like politically advantageous for these people to replace the white population. But even though that is something that the Democrats will announce out loud and can also be revealed in undercover videos of the State Department, I promise you this video is going to end up getting the wrong think badge for the great replacement under it. I've had it happen several times. To this day, YouTube, if you have anything mentioning demographic replacement in your title or in your description, will flag your video as having wrongthink on it. You'll get the little Wikipedia saying, this is a conspiracy theory. Even better, it's a white nationalist conspiracy theory, even though it's literally what the Democrats announced their plan to be, even though it's literally what the State Department says the Democrats' plan is. It's listed as a conspiracy because that's what they want you to believe. They don't want you to actually think about it or look at it. So obviously, Elon Musk is very aware of this problem, right? Like he grasps the dire nature of what is going on, the sinister nature of what is being leveled at European Americans. Again, it is bad to wipe out any racial group. It is bad to try to ethnically cleanse this place, America, just like it's bad to ethnically cleanse other places. So this isn't like, oh, you only need to protect European civilization, or it's only bad to ethnically cleanse Europeans. No, I think it's bad to do that in general. But we don't talk about why it's bad for whites, even though we acknowledge it's bad for every other group. So when we have people openly stating, yeah, it's our intention to ethnically cleanse America because we have to make it less white so Democrats can win more elections, I think it's reasonable to come out and say that's a problem. Like the fact that we have such a difficulty acknowledging that when we would call it out immediately anywhere else is just insane. Right? I hear a lot of people whining about the ethnic cleansing in Israel and Gaza and all that, Palestinians. And yeah, fair enough. But I often don't hear those same people spending a whole lot of time talking about the ethnic cleansing happening here in Europe. And not always, of course, there are people who are opposed to what Israel is doing right now that also, point out demographic problems in Europe and in America, but I see them far more obsessed with whatever's happening in Gaza than they are the ongoing thing that's happening in Europe and the United States as we speak. So if Elon understands all this stuff, what's with the H-1B support, right? Now, I'll say this. It's been a while. It's been over a year since Elon's famous Christmas crash out on the H-1Bs where he and Vivek went nuts and started fighting and threatening. And, it was Elon who was really, to be fair, Vivek's original post was bad. It was very bad, but it was Elon that really decided to get in there and knife fight over it, to constantly be hitting it, to constantly be attacking people on it. And so but it has been over a year since that happened. And it could be that things have just gotten worse and Elon has recognized how bad they've gotten. Maybe he has changed his mind over the time. I don't know. If he hasn't really announced that. He hasn't said, okay, I understand I was wrong about H-1Bs. I'm, looking at what's happening in Europe and America. I understand the seriousness of mass immigration. I understand H-1Bs are part of that. And so I need to, kind of step back and, change and reformulate how I understand immigration. Maybe he is doing that, but he hasn't announced that. And so I can only really go off of where he is right now that I know. Maybe he has changed his mind, but the last update we had was despite recognizing these obvious problems, he is not addressing them when it comes to what he thinks of as high-skilled immigration. Now, I think this is a fallacy in of itself. Obviously, we have a lot of H-1Bs coming in the United States, and very few of them are actually high-skilled immigration. We have a lot of people coming in H-1Bs for, entry level jobs, internships, things that are not high skill, that are not something you need a seasoned veteran for. They're literally coming in at the entry level, which is the definition of not needing that high skill H-1B. And yet it happens all the time. Now, for Elon, maybe he uses more of those, right? Maybe he uses far more high skilled H-1Bs than most people, while everyone else is, bringing in guys to undercut a programmer or, manage a 7-Eleven. Elon is saying, actually, no, I really am bringing in some really bright guys who are just doing something no one else is doing. Maybe he's the one guy who's using the H-1B correctly. I don't know. I can't say I've done an audit of all of his companies and who he brings in. So maybe his experience with H-1B workers is different, but he needs to be smart enough. I mean, he's a smart guy, needs to be, I guess, wise enough is the better word here, to apply, to be able to see beyond his own experience. Okay, maybe you, Elon Musk, running SpaceX and Tesla, are getting like the cream of the crop of the H-1Bs. And so your experience is every H-1B guy I bring over here is a rocket scientist. So yeah, of course they're great. Okay, maybe. I still have problems with that, but I guess I can at least sympathize with having that narrow experience. And maybe he simply needs to be able to project himself into these other, industries where it's clear that the H-1B is being used as an ethnic replacement tool. Because remember, about 80% of H-1B workers are Indian. That stat is staggering. Of all the countries that could use H-1B, 80% almost is coming from one country, and that country is India. And I'm sorry, but the IQ in India is not 130, right? Like, that's not the average IQ there. Now, when you have 1 billion people, you're going to have some percentage of the smartest people in the world. That's just how numbers work, right? You got a bell curve. You got a big enough bell curve. Once you get to that, 130, 140 IQ, if you got it over 1 billion people in country, you're going to have some geniuses. Like, that's going to happen. So initially, you could see why some percentage would come from there. But there's no way that 80% of all of the best workers that are supposed to be coming in on H-1B are all coming from India. That's just not the case. So it's obviously a tool of ethnic patronage. That's what the H-1B is. That's why Indians in America, like Vivek and others, I think Nikki Haley is also on this list, though I know her son isn't. But that's why they tend to be big backers of the H-1B, because they're using it to bring their co-ethnics in. That's really all there is to it. It's not super complicated. They want to bring as much of the Indian diaspora into the United States as they can, and the H-1B is the best vehicle to do so. And so you think if Elon Musk would understand the problems of demographic replacement, he would see this. Now, don't get me wrong. He's against illegal immigration, and that's great. Illegal immigration is down a lot by the way. Remember, Trump has basically turned it into a non-issue overnight, which is massive. I want to remind people again, anyone telling you we would have been better under Kamala Harris, or, you're going to be better under Gavin Newsom than the administration that's bringing you literally like basically zero illegal immigration. Okay, like that person's obviously a bad actor. That's obviously bad faith. You can say you don't like a lot of what the Trump administration is doing. You can say you're disappointed. They're not serious enough. They're not, taking every action you want. Fine. But the delusion that they're somehow like worse than the Democrats, or you would have been better off with Kamala Harris, because like, I don't know, it's going to accelerate things and things will get worse, and then people will really vote for the true, reactionary leader. That's not how it works. You would just have more illegal immigrants in your country who would skew the vote even further left, because we're still a democracy. So unless you've got an armed revolution hiding in your pocket, you've got to figure out how to win votes, and you win votes by not bringing in more of Democrat voters. If the Democrat Party, their entire goal, as explained by a State Department official, is to bring in as many people who aren't white into the country to vote against you, if that's the plan, then it's probably in your interest to do the opposite of that plan. Whatever the opposite of that plan is, like closing the border and not allowing these people in, that's probably where your interests lie. Okay. So obviously you're in a scenario where you are benefiting heavily from Donald Trump shutting down illegal immigration. But the issue that has continually been a battle after Donald Trump came in is legal immigration. Because it's not just illegal immigration that is the problem. There are millions of people becoming American every year from outside this country, and the majority of them are not going to be natural conservatives. In fact, we never get natural conservatives. Anyone telling you that this one ethnic group is going to be a natural conservative, they're lying to you. Foreigners are not conservative. They're individually, there could be, right? I think the last actually conservative wave of immigration we got was the Cubans, and they literally were all the people who were escaping communism. Okay, like that. So that's probably your best indication of like if you have an entire population fleeing radical leftist tyranny, they might be a natural conservative. But outside of that, the idea that we're going to get more of any given ethnicity and they're just because they got families and maybe they're not big on gay marriage, they're going to vote Republican. Well, guess what? The black community doesn't like gay marriage and they vote Democrat. You know, it's the natural, then there's no natural conservatism there. Same with Hispanics, same with, Jews and Indians and everyone else. You look at the numbers, they don't vote conservative. They just don't. And bringing more of them here is not going to solve that problem. So obviously, when you have a lot of mass immigration coming in through the jobs programs, you're going to have a culture shift. Now, a lot of people say, well, Auron, illegal immigration was millions of people a year coming off, and there's a cap on the H-1B. So how bad can it be? How bad can it be? Well, the problem is that the H-1B is not a temporary worker program because we have birthright citizenship. So the minute an Indian person hits the ground in the United States, if they or their wife pops out a kid, they're going to be here. That the immigration issue is solved and they're here now. So yes, technically, there is a theoretical cap, which gets relatively they're pretty loose with it, but there is a cap on how many H-1B workers are going to come in. But those people they're permanent residents, basically. It's not a temporary work visa like it's supposed to be. It's not, they come over here, they fill that job for a couple of years and they go home. No, that's not what happens. Once they're here, they're going to stay here. And then they're going to bring their family across and they're going to have more kids. And all of a sudden, that one Indian tech worker becomes 20, 30, 40 votes for Democrats. Because if you look at the numbers, they vote 70% Democrat. I hate to break this to you, but the Indian population you're bringing in through the H-1Bs is a Democrat constituency. They just bought off the Republican Party, so they'll shut up about it. I've seen this battle, man. Like when the first NatCon I went to, it was so obvious that India was basically fighting to like become this model minority inside the Republican Party, even though the majority of them are going to vote left. Like they had this massive presence, that like you had Indian leaders and talking about how 1 billion Indians are standing behind you. No, they're not. They're standing behind the Democratic Party. And so when you have this H-1B scenario, you're bringing in lots of people. And of course, remember, that's just one visa. Then you have student visas and everything else, exceptional visas, tourist visas, all this stuff. That's constantly letting people legally into the country. But the minute, they have a kid or, they find some kind of application for asylum or something, they're here now. And for some reason, Elon just doesn't see the dichotomy in that he's in one instance calling for the end of the Great Replacement, but is running a key arm of the Great Replacement. Now, it's the least malicious one, I guess, compared to illegal immigration, but it's still malicious because remember, you're not just bringing these people in. You're putting them theoretically, if you're actually using the visa the way it was supposed to be done, you're putting them into important positions. These are not guys picking fruit. These are not guys mowing your lawn. These are guys who are taking high-level positions in important companies, right? Again, if it's being used correctly, many of them aren't, but some percentage of them are, which means they're going to become elite. They're going to become leaders. They're going to lead their companies. They're going to have influence in the United States. Their children are going to go to prestigious schools. They're going to replace your elite as well. So in some ways, this is actually worse because at least when it's illegal immigration, the majority of people coming in are only going to replace your lower working class. Now, that's its own problem because obviously we don't want to see working class wages go down. We don't want to see the quality of living for our working class Americans go down, housing, everything else that gets impacted at that level. So it's still very bad. But in a way, the elite immigration is worse because it's moving into your elite. It's moving into your ruling class, and they're going to bring that ethnic, solidarity, that clannishness into those positions. They're going to bring their understanding. I mean, look at Vivek. Oh, American culture. It's not as good as Indian culture. Can't you guys just learn to stop watching Saved by the Bell and spend all your time, studying spelling bee words? That's the attitude that's going to get brought in by guys like that. There's a reason this guy is a disaster of a candidate in Ohio at this point. Because like even the Democrat is running ads saying, "Hey, this guy hates white people. This guy hates America." Because I mean, it's hard to not notice that level of kind of ethnic resentment and nepotism inside these communities. And again, I don't really begrudge this honestly from a lot of people. It's what people do. People are by nature tribal. They are by nature clannish. And to some extent, it's our fault for importing people with that mentality. But we got to stop. Like whether it's their fault or whether it's the fault of the elites importing them, the point is you just can't do this. And Elon has to grasp that. He has to get it. Now, there's a lot of contradictions like this, right? Like Elon always has this problem. He has this problem with the birth rate, right? He'll talk about, oh, why don't we have higher birth rates? Humans need to have more children. Everybody should have more children. Americans need to have more children. White people need to have more children. But then he turns around and he starts releasing like these AI girlfriends so that, lonely guys can not have to go out and find a woman. They can just spend all their time talking to their AI girlfriend. And so Elon has this like truly Faustian, dichotomy where on one hand, he sees the problem. We need more births. We need to stop, removing white people from their native lands, replacing them with other people. But then when it comes to his business ventures, when it comes to his ability to do things and make things, Elon completely forgets all those consequences. He completely forgets like the things that he's doing are actually going to have an impact on what he says are his values, what the principles he espouses. And so you have this real problem where Elon just can't seem to grasp that he has to take the things he believes, the things he espouses, and apply them to his business practices to actually limit what he wants to do with his businesses, even though that's very important to him. Like he has to prioritize the people in the nation over this. And I wonder in some ways if it's because he's an immigrant. When he sees Europe or South Africa, he starts talking about the great replacement. When it comes to America, he starts describing us as a sports team and you got to get the best people on your sports team. Well, why is America a sports team, but Europeans have a homeland? Why is that? Is it because Elon doesn't really think of himself as an American, or he thinks of America as just a collection of people making money? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Or it could just be that this is the problem of like the merchant class, the technocratic class, right? Like, yes, abstractly, Elon has these values and understands the problem. But when it comes down to making money and making things happen, he's always going to side with commerce. He's always going to side with money power because that's all he really knows how to use. That's the only way he understands how to value things. He's a business minded. He's money minded. All of his goals are included in that understanding of the world. And so maybe it's simply like just the form of how he has become an elite has made it impossible for him to see the problems that kind of arise when there's that clash between his ideology and then like his practical goals. Again, I don't know exactly what it is. I'd love to ask him if someone said, "Oh, can you have him on to have an interview and talk about this?" And the answer is, man, if you've got a number, please let me know. If you can figure out how to help me get Elon on the show to ask him these questions, I would be very grateful. But yeah, that's really what I just wanted to talk about is like there is this mentality, and it really is in a way kind of the boomer mentality of like I see a problem, but I am simply unwilling to sacrifice the material comforts and like the infinite line go up mentality to address this problem. This is, to be fair, like a conservative problem. It's a libertarian problem. Just everybody who's obsessed with money and markets over their history, their heritage, their tradition, their religion, their understanding as a people. Like anytime you're just going to put money and process and achievement technologically over that, you're going to produce predictable results. Like that how you orient your goals will ultimately manifest itself, right? Like you can say, oh, well, I value this or I value that. But really, your true actions, your true incentives, your true desires, they're gonna be formulated. They're gonna like kind of manifest themselves when you then pursue those things, right? If he had placed the tradition and like identity and purpose and well-being of the country he lived in first, and that had been the orienting understanding of what he was about to do, then perhaps he would have changed his business practice. He would recognize this dichotomy that exists between his business interests and the ideological concerns, or the larger concerns that he is trying to address. But because he cannot orient himself in that way, it does not manifest itself. So I'm hoping that, I mean, he's really been hitting this like daily. On like daily, Elon Musk is now talking about white replacement, the great replacement, demographic transformation, anti-white hatred. Like we are seeing multiple posts a day from Elon on this topic. So I'm hoping he's moving this direction. I hope he's coming to address this. I'm sure that with the kind of the crash out he had last Christmas and kind of what it seems to be his healing with the Trump administration. He was at Charlie Kirk's funeral. It seemed like he and Trump were like kind of putting the building blocks back together after all of that. Maybe he is recognizing that. I hope he's on a journey to getting to kind of reconciling these things, because he's one of the most important men in the world, arguably the most important man in the world. And the things he cares about and the things he understands and the way he's pursuing things matters quite a bit. So he's already a mouthpiece to point out these problems, which is already a massive win and a huge leap from where we were. But I hope he continues down that road and recognizes the cost of what he is trying to impose through his business on what he says are his wider concerns about the future of the America and Europe and the West in general. All right, so I also wanted to talk about a few other things. Obviously, we had the storming of the church with Don Lemon and his crew earlier in the week on Sunday. Now, a lot of people were immediately saying, where are the arrests? Where are the arrests? Now, I was one of those people saying we need arrests, but I knew, especially given that this is a federal issue and you have Martin Luther King Day on that Monday, the courts are closed. It was going to take a couple days to make this happen. I had Will Chamberlain on my show to explain how and why this would happen. He said it was going to happen within the next 96 hours. I think it happened at like hour 92. So he got right in there. He got right in on the line as to when that was going to happen. So the good news is that there are now 3 arrests. Not as many as I had hoped, but more than a lot of people expected. It was a lot of nothing will happen. Nobody will go to jail. No one's going to get charged. The Trump administration won't do anything. That was not the case. Sorry, it just wasn't the case. There was a happening. Nothing ever happens, bros. We're wrong. The Trump administration is never going to do anything, bros. We're wrong. Something did happen. And it's not insignificant. So the people arrested were, what was that guy's name? William Kelly, I believe, which was the big, angry, bearded guy screaming at people, insulting people, intimidating people. He was probably the easiest charge for them to ultimately lay down. So he was charged. You also had Nakima Lee Armstrong. She is a Black Lives Matter activist, and she has organized multiple protests like this. She is involved in the management of the organization. So that's a significant one, because that's not just some random street guy that happened to come into the protest. That's a real significant leader figure on the left, person who's guilty of kind of multiple operations like this, someone who's been probably funneling money and all this other stuff. And so that's a key hit, not only because it gets her, but there's a possibility there that if you're putting together, I don't know, a RICO case after the Charlie Kirk assassination, you could maybe connect these things in some way. There's a Black Lives Matter activist who's involved in conspiracy to deny civil rights. She's convicted. Oh, look, she also works for this Black Lives Matter organization. Oh, that Black Lives Matters organization is receiving funding from a Soros NGO. Oh, I wonder if that Soros NGO has any influence on her taking these actions. And all of a sudden you can start rolling that stuff up. So I hope that conviction will make other convictions easier, assuming, of course, that there would be a conviction. And then there was a third person arrested as well. So far 3 arrests. Now, I think it was around 20 people entered the church. So I was hoping for more arrests. I would really like to see the Trump administration to push for as many as they can get. The one that everyone is very disappointed in, including me, is Don Lemon. Don Lemon was not charged. And to be clear, it's not because the Trump administration didn't try. It's not that the Trump administration just didn't bother to file papers. Don Lemon was a request was placed, a complaint was placed in front of a federal magistrate in Minnesota, and they refused to sign it. So you could not get the grand jury indictment. You couldn't get the arrest warrant. So that is very frustrating, and I very much hope that the Trump administration is not going to stop here. Okay, I understand why they didn't arrest him. You can't get the federal order signed. That's a larger problem with judges. We can talk about the Republican Congress, especially the Senate, and what a garbage it is and how useless it is for the thousandth time. But the Trump administration can only do so much because of that scenario. However, what they can do is try to figure out other avenues. Can we shop the venue? Can we get a different judge? Is there a different type of charge we think is more likely to stick that we can get a judge to sign on? Is there some way in which we can encourage the parishioners to bring civil suits against Don Lemon to punish him that way? There are many, many opportunities to punish Don Lemon. And I hope that the Trump administration takes them. I hope that the parishioners of that church take them. In fact, here is my, here's me offering my aid. If you are a parishioner of that church, if Don Lemon broke into your church and stopped your worship service, if there is any way in which I can help raise money for, raise awareness of, or whatever, a lawsuit you're bringing against Don Lemon, let me know and I will help you in whatever capacity I can, as much as I can use my platform to raise money, raise awareness, make connections, whatever. If you are bringing criminal, or if you're bringing civil charges, if you're bringing a lawsuit against Don Lemon, let me know. If you have any interest, let me know. I will do whatever I can to make that happen. Okay. So that's my personal willingness to be a part of this solution. But there are many ways you can go after Don Lemon, and that should be done. Now, this puts us in a bit of a scenario, because I said, look, the Trump administration has to do something on this. And they did. They did something. Pretending they didn't do something is dumb. They absolutely did something. But I think you got to get Don Lemon on this. I really do. I think it's actually very important to know that leftists pretending to be journalists do not get to coordinate terror attacks. I think that really matters. I don't think Don Lemon gets to skip out on being a terrorist because he was on a journalist on CNN for a while. I don't think he gets to scare children. I don't think he gets to, mock children fleeing their church because he wants to intimidate them, as he admitted openly and repeatedly. Like Don Lemon said openly, he likes to scare Christian children. I'm going to say that again. Don Lemon said openly and repeatedly, he enjoys scaring Christian children. He feels it necessary. He wants them to be afraid. He wants them to be uncomfortable. That's what Don Lemon wants. That was his stated intention. That guy needs to go to jail, or he needs to be sued into oblivion. So I'm glad that the Trump administration took action. They took action in as timely manner as they could. They got several key people to be charged. They attempted to get Don Lemon charged. It's not like they gave him a free pass, but they literally just had an activist judge say, no, I'm not going to sign this. I don't think it should end there, but let's cut these guys some level of slack and give them some level of credit on this. Things were done. Punishment was meted out. Now, obviously, we got to go through the court process, whole thing. They might be convicted. They might not. There's only so much the Trump administration could do about every one of those steps. But the Trump administration did take action here, and they did attempt to go after Don Lemon. But there's only so much you can do when the judicial system is in the scenario it's in. Now, maybe the ultimate answer is that the Trump administration has to just ignore judges, do whatever they have to do. I think that's probably true at some level, though probably not on this one. This is probably not the one thing you want to start ignoring judges on. You should start ignoring them when it comes to deportations or something like that. Not this. However, at this level, at this point, there is some level at which the GOP is bound by law. And the Trump administration is bound by law. Now, I don't think that's an excuse. I think the Republican Congress is insane and stupid and useless and full of cowards. And that the GOP is just controlled opposition in a large degree. But within that, the Trump administration is obviously taking actions that no other Republican administration would have taken. And you have to remember that, guys. You just have to. Okay. I know it can be frustrating. I know that there are aspects of the Trump administration that are not ideal. I am 100% on board with you on that. I'm fine vocalizing that. I am the guy who says sometimes you got to chimp. Okay. So it's not like I'm pretending that's not an issue, but we should have the ability to say, okay, even if they're wrong on some things, when they get something right, we're going to praise them and we're going to encourage them to do more. And the Trump administration did bring charges. They did get key members. They did try to get Don Lemon. I just want to encourage them to continue to do that, to continue to push, to continue to be aggressive, to not let this go, to be dogged with this. It really matters. It really matters. And finally, before we go, I wanted to mention that violent crime is down, that murders are down about 20% across Americans, major American cities under Donald Trump. This is being listed as a 100-year low when it comes to violent crime in the United States. So even though we're seeing these crazy leftists doing all this stuff, all this violence in America, we're still seeing a drop in the murder rate. We're still seeing a 20% reduction, a history-setting level of violent crime. That big of a drop, a historic drop in violent crime in major American cities. That's huge, right? So again, whether it's immigration or it's violent crime, remember, whatever you feel about the Trump administration, you're in much better shape because they're in power. That's really all there is to it. The illegals are being deported. The left is at least seeing some level of punishment and pushback. Violent crime is down. This is the reality in Trump's America. Sorry. You can have all the problems you want with him on foreign policy, or he's too buddy with Israel or whatever. But the reality on the ground is your family is safer. There are fewer illegals. The border is closed because of Donald Trump. That's really all there is to it. And it's not some mystery. Donald Trump is willing to prosecute. He's willing to bring charges. He's willing to carry out deportations, which removes violent criminals from our streets. He's willing to go in to places like Washington, D.C. and enforce law and order with the National Guard if necessary. Donald Trump is willing to take direct action to reduce crime in American cities, and it's working. The numbers are there. It's provable. We're seeing a drop in murder rates because of what's going on. The policies of the Trump administration are working. Getting violent immigrants off the street, getting violent illegals off the street is working. Bringing the National Guard in to clean up American cities is working. The murder rates are going down. The murder rate in Washington, D.C. plummeted once the National Guard hits the streets there. So we need to start giving credit where it's due on this stuff. Again, it doesn't mean you don't push them on stuff. It doesn't mean we don't keep saying Don Lemon needs to go to jail. It doesn't mean we don't keep saying we need more deportations, higher deportation. It doesn't mean we don't keep saying I need to see penalties for business owners, and we need to see more E-Verify, and we need to see taxes on remittances, and we need to see the removal of benefits for illegals. All this stuff we need to keep pushing for. We need to keep chimping on that stuff. I'm not turning away from any of that, but we have to recognize violent crime down, immigration down, leftists going to jail for harassing Christians with the with laws that used to be used to throw conservatives in jail. These are all wins, and you got to be willing to take wins. Now they're important, they're obvious, they're significant, but they aren't sufficient, and that's fine. You can say that. You can say the Trump administration is winning, the Trump administration is doing good things, but it's not enough and it needs to do more. I'm fine with that. That's completely reasonable. But it is winning, and it is doing these things, and it is reaching those accomplishments, and it is better than any Republican administration in my lifetime by orders of magnitude. So while I can be frustrated with the Trump administration, I understand why you can be frustrated with the Trump administration. I think it's important when we see wins like this to acknowledge them, to encourage them, and to use those as springboards to ask for more. But to recognize that we are still much better off than we would have been. And any people running around telling you that actually it's more than fine if Kamala gets in power, a little more Joe Biden would have been fine. A little Gavin Newsom, that'll get Americans to wake up and start voting right wing. No, it won't. It'll just screw us over more. We win by winning. You win by winning. And right now, Trump is winning. He's winning on immigration. He's winning on deportations. He's winning on violent crime in cities. Sorry, he's winning on that stuff. Maybe it's not as much as we want. Maybe you could say it's not even sufficient. He has to win more and he's too far behind. That's fine, but he is winning. And so I think it's just important to acknowledge that. All right, let's take a look at the questions of the people here real quick. Thank you for staying through that disconnection there, guys. Chair Coke Nixon says, I understand why greedy elites want demographic change, but what explains the Anglosphere progressive bourgeois love of illegals and hatred of ICE? Well, that's really simple. They have taken that political advantage and translated into an ideological justification. So the party understands, the political apparatchiks, they understand that there's this political and economic advantage to them. But then they have brainwashed the American people into saying, well, you don't really have a homeland, and it's actually evil to think of yourself as an American, and America is just a bunch of immigrants. It doesn't have any real identity, and anyone can really be an American. It's kind of racist if you pretend that America is like a people and a place and a culture that actually should be preserved. I actually just wrote a piece on this. I recorded the video and put it up yesterday if you want to hear more of my thoughts on this. But I think it's really just that these people have been used. Their kind of their good instincts. The Europeans just in general, especially in the Anglosphere, have a low tribal characteristics. They tend to not be as ethnically clannish as other groups. I've even seen some white nationalist guys lament that white people are just terminally unable to be tribal like everyone else, and that's a problem. However you feel about that, that is just true. And so because that's the case, it was easier to exploit that and treat it as like a pathology, and then use that against I think the people to kind of brainwash them into being okay with their own replacement. And it's our job to fix that now. That's what we're doing. Okay, we are deprogramming people. We are trying to make them aware that this mentality that they brought on, that they just have to sit around placidly while they're replaced in their own homeland. That's not something you have to do. You don't have to live that way. It doesn't mean you need to hate people. It doesn't mean you need to be mean to people. It doesn't mean you need to hold hate in your heart. But you have the right to. I think my friend Carl Benjamin has the perfect phrase for this: demographic security. You have the right to demographic security. You have the right to care about who's in your country and what your country looks like, and whether your tradition and your history and your religion and language and everything else are going to be perpetuated. You have the right to that, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we need to be encouraging people. It's not about hatred. It's about saying it's okay for every other people to protect their nature, who they are, what their country looks like, and to care about who comes there. You have that right to. Nixon also says, and how do we deprogram Anglosphere normies? Even Gen Z women love this migrant predator. They complain about men in vague language. Yeah, I already addressed most of this, but that is an issue. A lot of feminists will talk about men in a collective group as if, men are violent. Men like to sexually assault women. Men are disrespectful women. And what they're saying most of the time is immigrant men who have not gone through the liberal, processing. And so they'll just take, ironically, they'll take the crimes of violent, immigrant rapists, transpose them onto their native white population, and then they'll favor the very guys who are actually doing the raping over the white population. And that's a larger problem. I mean, first we have to stop talking about each other as if we're in some kind of gender war. It's not men versus women in a civilization. The minute you have a man versus woman contest in your civilization, there's something very, very wrong. We got to get along with each other. We got to love each other. We're on the same team. At the end of the day, we have to be on the same team. We have to care about our country, our people, our future. And you can't sit around saying all the men or all the women. Are there problems with women? Are there problems with men in the current day and modernity? Yes, of course. Is it okay to address those? Sure. But it needs to be in a loving, concerned way, a way that you're looking to better each other and heal that bond, not where you're just basically just facilitating your own bad behavior. Because that's a lot of what feminism is, and that's also what a lot of the red pill manosphere stuff is. It's just two sides of the same coin, two kind of broken, people who are just looking to be able to hate each other and to blame each other for what's going on around them. And that has to stop. We have to be able to look at each other and say, whatever male or female issues and dynamics might be going on, ultimately, we are together, we are a people, and we have to respect that. Americans should be able to, man or woman, figure this out and not have to resort to like saying, oh, well, it's all the men or it's all the women. And so then just import a bunch of other women. And yeah, again, I see this on the other side. It's not like I don't see a bunch of manosphere guys saying, just go marry yourself an Asian woman. Just go order some woman from Russia, or something. Get yourself a Slavic bride or something. I don't know. Go get some women from a foreign country to solve this problem. It happens on both sides, so just keep that in mind. Nixon also says, plus hidden tsunami of anti-white hate crimes now. Yeah, that's another thing I did want to talk about as well when I was talking about crimes. While I do think crime is down overall, don't forget that one reason we might be seeing a dip in crime statistics is how many of these major cities just aren't reporting crime, especially minority crime. So I think there is a general reduction in violent crime, but somewhere in those stats are probably the fact that we're just not reporting crimes. We're not treating them as seriously anymore, especially when they're done by minorities, the demographics that would be inconvenient to our narrative. We just tend to not record them, or mark all the Hispanics as white and stuff, and then that we don't have to notice where that crime's going. So just keep that in mind when we're discussing those crime statistics. Treadle says, hear me out. What if we get him to read Camp of the Saints? Yes, this is basically just a book plug. The translation is great on Audible. Yes, that book is now widely available, which is fantastic. And so everyone can now look at what was basically a very banned book. I imagine that Elon Musk probably has some familiarity, honestly, with that book. But if we can, I'll put together that series where me and Elon Musk, we read through Camp of the Saints together. I think that'd be a great one. So if anyone can set me up with that, we'll definitely do that. Cherry Coke Nixon says 80% of H-1Bs are from India. Their culture is the second most incompatible after Mohammedan culture. Why can't we select based on values and culture? Yeah, I spoke to that quite a bit in today's episode, so I'm not going to rehash all of that, but I absolutely agree with you. Not from Red Riding Hood says, anime is cool and all, but I'd really prefer if Elon would just stop with the H-1B cringe and just went more hardline and actually serious on this issue. Yeah, I absolutely agree 100%. Sean Weiland says, thanks, Elon, for talking about it, but we need you to invest your Elon bucks into people and projects that are actually going to solve it. Absolutely. Elon has a massive fortune. I encourage him very much to become the rights benefactor, to really invest in a truly aristocratic way in institutions and people that will achieve the goals that he's looking for. Now, he has already put his money where his mouth is. Remember, he put like $100 million in the Trump campaign. So it's not like Elon's just been sitting on that war chest. He has done that. But don't just give it to, Trump. Like, that's good. I'm not saying don't give it to Trump. But I'm saying in addition to that, start building foundations. I mean, $100 million. How many young, bright, right-wing guys could you fund with $100 million? How many great thinkers, guys who otherwise would be stuck, like, I don't know, teaching high school somewhere? No, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, how many guys who are just having to work normal jobs who would be fantastic, in a think tank or writing books or, doing journalism, activism? Like, how many of those guys who could really make a difference, apply pressure on the judiciary, file lawsuits, get a legal defense fund going? How much could that could you do with $100 million? Quite a bit. So if Elon was willing to put $100 million into the Trump campaign, do the same thing for these organizations. Make a difference. Create new institutions that will serve our interests. Nathan Danner says, attorney Robert Barnes represented a lawsuit recently against Don Lemon. It was settled out of court. I've seen Barnes on Twitter. I think he follows me. I do know that he's right wing and whatnot. I don't know anything about him filing lawsuits, especially against Don Lemon, so I can't really speak to that. But I mean, hopefully he was successful and got Don Lemon to pay a decent amount of cheese out of court. I really don't know. Joe McDermott says, when it comes to discussing immigration realistically, we always get stuck on getting people to admit the immigrants form blocks. Always idealism, never Machiavellianism. Yeah, and that's why I hit this so hard, right? Like, we have to recognize that these immigrants are not individuals. Sorry, they're not autonomous individuals. You're not just bringing in one guy who's good at one thing. You're bringing him in, and you're bringing his family in. You're bringing his extended family in. You're bringing their friends and family in. That way, our current immigration policy is still set up, even with the Trump administration, is one of chain migration. Until we end birthright citizenship, until we end these immigration preferences, until we change the way that this works, we're going to continue to have these like clannish immigrant groups come in. And you can't tell white people, okay, well, you're not allowed to be collective. You're not allowed to talk about your collective interests. You're not allowed to recognize yourself as people. But we are going to bring in Indians and Asians and like all these other groups, Hispanics, who are 100% dedicated. Like, we'll literally just name their organizations La Raza, the race. Like, we're going to bring these people in, and you're just going to have to compete them in the meritocracy. Yeah, they're allowed to, be nepotistic and only hire people who look like them and turn the entire IT department of your company into like this Indian jobs program. But you're not allowed to notice that. And you're certainly not allowed to do that yourself. Like, we can't live that way. Something has to change. Let's see here. We also have Lone Wolf, who says, if you were to pick 3 books for a normie to read, which would you recommend? Philosophy, political. So this is always a tricky one, because really the question is, what have you read, right? If you have not read the basics, then the first 3 books I would tell you to read are like Plato's Republic / Laws. You should read both, really. Like Aristotle's Politics, Ethics, Rhetoric. We're already above 3, right? So, have you read any of these like foundational authors? If you don't have that, Machiavelli, have you read The Prince? Have you read Discourses on Livy? If you don't have some of that under your belt, then it's going to be hard to say, okay, well, you should just skip that to something else. But let's assume that you have those down, or maybe you're only interested in more modern tomes. I'm assuming you want something a little more than just, hey, read all of the political science stuff you should read in your first year at college. If you're asking that question, I would say that like the big 3 books I would encourage people to read in a more modern sense would probably be The Machiavellians by John Burnham. That'll get you your primer for elite theory. I would say you could probably include The Managerial Revolution in there, though really I would say Machiavellians is more important if you're trying to understand political dynamics at this one moment. I would say that you should probably read Why Liberalism Has Failed is good. It's a primer. I don't know if it's essential if I'm limiting myself to 3, though. I would say you probably need to read Concept of the Political, Carl Schmitt. I would say that, or Political Theology. I would encourage more the Concept of the Political, probably, but either one is probably a good start to get your toe in. And then what 3rd book would I say that you probably want to read? I could throw Yarvin or Land out there, and I think they're both really important. I would say the problem is like The Dark Enlightenment is a great book, but it really needs to be read in reference to Yarvin, and Yarvin is a much larger read, so they can grasp all of that stuff. So that would be one that's important, but probably needs a lot more reading context. So much of this stuff is interconnected. I guess if I was going to go with a 3rd modern book, along with the Machiavellians and Concept of the Political, I would probably say that you want to read On Power by Bertrand de Juvenal. On Power is probably the most underrated of all of the books, probably the one that gets the least. Everyone's heard of Burnham at this point. Everyone's heard of Yarvin at this point. A lot of people have heard of Land at this point. Very few people are still going back to someone like Bertrand de Juvenal. And Bertrand de Juvenal informed Yarvin. He informed Hoppe, who also informed Land. So if you are interested in any of those people's thoughts, Yarvin, Land, Hans Hermann Hoppe, you're a libertarian and you like his stuff, I'm telling you, The Democracy That God That Failed is just ripping off Bertrand de Juvenal in a great way. Like, he does a good job of kind of recontextualizing it and modernizing it and adding some libertarianism in there as well, which I think are the weakest parts. But his restatements of de Juvenal are still, I think, very valuable to read. So if I was going to say like 3 modern books, it would probably be The Machiavellians, Concept of the Political, and On Power by Bertrand de Juvenal. All right, and I think we got one more here. It's Hood again. It says, and read Total State by Auron MacIntyre. Yes, thank you very much. I was not going to show my own book as one of the most important If you have to only read 3. But I am proud of that book. I do think it synthesizes a lot of the authors I just talked about. So if you want to get like a primer, that's I I wrote The Total State in the hope that my book would be to managerial elite theory and neo reaction in this to the kind of the same thing that James Burnham's Machiavellians was to Italian elite theory. I was hoping that I could summarize and update and kind of synthesize in a way that was readable and accessible in a short tome, kind of everything after what Burnham wrote about that helps to update what Burnham wrote about. That was kind of, I was hoping it was more of a spiritual successor that did a similar thing, but brought in newer authors and a wider range of kind of the newer ideas into the kind of the tradition that Burnham was writing in. So if you are looking for something like that, yes, I would also agree that The Total State by some guy named Auron MacIntyre is also a pretty good read for that. All right, guys, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Again, thank you so much for hanging with me through the internet going out. We all survived. The left was not able to shut us down. It was okay. If you would like to get more of this, of course, you need to subscribe on YouTube. If you have not, you need to click the bell, notifications, all that stuff, so you know when we go live. If you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you do, please leave a rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, I will talk to you next time.